All right, I think we can get started. It's 12 o'clock. Uh, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Elmien Sinclair, who is an educational psychologist and the head of academic counseling and development at Stellenbosch University. She worked in different high schools across South Africa for 10 years before she furthered her studies at Stellenbosch University and started working in higher education 13 years ago. She obtained a PhD degree from Stellenbosch University in 2019. Her research focuses on student success, student development, and the transformation of student counseling services. Okay, and yes, there is Dr. Sinclair. I will stop sharing my screen now.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. Let me just share my screen. There it is. I hope it's showing on your side.
Yes, I can see it.
You can see it. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for having me on this cold, rainy Friday afternoon. When you contacted me last year, I was imagining myself standing somewhere in the library in front of a room full of people. And now I'm sitting in my dining room at my dining room table looking at a computer screen. So yeah, that's how one can't really predict how life will happen, and that can cause us a lot of stress. But okay, here I am. I also just want to introduce my co-presenter, Marianne Prince. Marianne is busy with her internship as an educational psychologist at the Center for Student Counselling and Development right now, and she's almost finished it. So Marianne, thank you for helping me. Marianne will be especially helpful near to the end of this session with answering your questions. So if you have any questions, please post it in the chat line, and as mentioned, we will address it at the end of the session. That will not be recorded. So I'm going to use this time now to speak to you a little bit about stress and about time. And I want you to focus on the topic line of this first slide, because I've written it in a specific manner for a specific reason. I said stress less, more time, enjoy, and then the next line, the postgraduate journey. And usually those first three, it's not words, phrases are not really associated always with a postgraduate journey. Usually it's stress more, less time, and not always a very enjoyable journey. But let's make it more enjoyable today. So we have an hour more or less that we're going to use for the talk, and then the last half hour for questions. But I was thinking I'm going to ask you to do something. At the moment, as I'm sitting here, there's many tabs open in my brain with lots of things going on, and I presume it will be the same thing for you. So let's start with a quick exercise. I want you to take your pen and a piece of paper, or even if you want to open a document on your computer or on your cell phone, whatever can work for you, and dump all the tabs that's open right now in your brain. So write down everything. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be written in a specific way. Just get rid of it, dump it. So it can be work related, it can be to-dos, it can be nice to have, anything. So if you don't have anything to write with or a piece of paper, maybe just find a way. I don't really want to say think about it, because I want you to forget about it. So find something just to get it out of your mind onto a piece of paper, or on a Word document, or on a notes page, on your cell phone screen, anything like that. So write on any tab that is open in your brain right now. just something interesting. They say it takes people on mid or senior management level between 1 and 6 hours to dump everything, to clear their minds, to be creative, strategic, and to solve problems. So we don't have 1 to 6 hours, but let's dump whatever's on our mind right now. Now, I want to invite you, as we talk about stress and about productivity and time in the following hour, as things come to your mind, to add it to your list. Remember, we're always switched on, and the world does not stop spinning. So just write it down as it pops into your mind. Just rid your brain from it and open the space between your ears. Okay, we're going to talk about stress, and I'm going to spend some time on the concept of stress is normal. Why do we stress? How do I know that I am stressing? What can I do to control my stress? And then I'm going to spend some real time on the concept of stress-free productivity. So that's something we've heard a lot during this lockdown time. People will say they're stressed out, and then you read that stress is normal when you're in lockdown, and it's normal to stress because of the uncertainty that you're experiencing. But you know what? It's built into our natural makeup to stress. Stress is part of our survival skills. Since the earliest days of human existence, we are trained to stress, to survive. Now, although humans have evolved a lot, the stress response remains more or less the same as when many moons ago people had to run away from lions on a daily basis for survival. So nowadays, we do have a very much evolved frontal cortex that can help us to understand stress and to manage it. But we still feel, when we see the PhD books lying there, or we see the thesis, we know that the due date for submission of the thesis is arriving. It still feels like a lion that's waiting for us around the corner, and we must decide if we're going to fight it or if we're going to run away from it. So what really happens is the following. So when your brain confuses the thesis work or the research or the notes that you have to deal with a lion, is the first thing, that's the external event that triggers the stress response. So never mind what it is, our brains tells us this is really dangerous, stress. You must either fight it, the second thing, or you must fight it, or you must flight. You must get away, jump into a tree. The adrenal gland secretes adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. Your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, fats and glucose are released for energy, Blood flow is diverted from the non-essential body areas to the muscles and the brain. Perspiration increases and your immune system are suppressed. Until the threat is removed, you are now sitting in the tree and you're feeling safer. Acetylcholine is released, the adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol levels lower, and the body returns back to normal. You go through this cycle many times every day when you stresses. What happens in the brain? A brain that's optimally functioning is active in basically 3 layers: the cortex, the outer layer of the brain, the limbic system, the middle part of the brain, and the reptilian brain is active when you are in an optimal mode for performance. But when you stress, the brain activity shifts down. So the neocortex, the outer layer of the brain, almost, if I can put it in, exclamation marks, die aanhalingstekenkies, the neocortex shuts down. The limbic system that controls our emotions first becomes a bit more active. So you start to cry and say, I can't handle all this work anymore. And then later, all the activity starts to concentrate in the reptilian brain. Now, you need your neocortex to make all these difficult decisions. So when you are so stressed up, it's very difficult to make all these difficult decisions and to write up, for example, your thesis notes, to interpret all your results, to even make decisions on about what you're going to do next. So we want our brains to be a little bit more relaxed to perform optimally. But is all stress negative? No. So when stress levels are too low, if this is the y-axis of a graph, this is the x-axis of a graph. So when stress levels are too low, what happens with performance? That's also low. So I usually tell the students that's when you, during the holiday time, lies in front of the TV watching series and your mom tells you, please go and make us some coffee, and you say, yes, mom, I will. So when stress levels are too low, our performance is also not very high. But as our stress levels increase, performance increases. So we need stress to perform, and therefore we get optimal levels of stress to perform optimal. But now what happens if our stress levels stays too high for too long? Performance lowers again. So that's when we develop anxiety, we become more disorganized, and we're at risk of having a breakdown, burnout. You're not going to perform optimally anymore. So the ideal is to keep your levels on a medium level to perform optimally. If it's too long, too high, we will become too anxious, disorganized, and we will not perform very well anymore. Just another way to that this can be visualized is if there's no pressure, you have more frustration, people are involved. If there's an average good level of stress, you get peak performance and health. If stress levels are too high, people are becoming more tired, indecisive, there's a decrease in the performance again, you get physical and mental illness and burnout. Another way to explain this is if you look at a violin string or the string of a guitar, there's an ideal tension that each one of these strings must have to make the right sound. So if the tension is too low, those of you who play a violin or who play a guitar will know the sound is terrible. There's almost no sound. It's like a dove clunk that it makes. So as you increase the stress in the violin or the guitar string, the sound is becoming clear until you have the perfect pitch. But if you increase the stress, the string will break. That's the same for us. We need to find our perfect pitch, but that's easier said than done. One way of doing it is to understand our own stress profile. Now, you already know that how I experience stress and how you experience stress differs. So, and sometimes the people around us knows that we stress before we even know it ourselves, because we're so busy stressing that we don't even realize we're stressing. The easiest way to manage our stress levels is to learn more about our own stress profile, to learn what triggers stress, and then how we can manage it. Now, stress has got a physical component. So how does my body react to it? It's got a cognitive component. What do I think when I'm stressing? What's all those automatic thoughts that's going through my mind? An emotional component. How do I feel? And a behavioral component. What do I do when I stress? So now I want you again to take your pen and your piece of paper, or your Word document that you've opened, or your cell phone page that you've opened, or maybe just think and reflect about it. How does your stress profile look? So what happens when you stress? Let's look at what can happen physically. Do you perhaps suffer from headaches? That's the red lights that our body provides us with to tell us, hey, you must stop, you must be careful. Something's wrong. You're stressing too much. Your violin string is going to break. So, is it headaches? Do you suffer from indigestion? Heart palpitations? Breathlessness? Nausea? Muscle twitches? Tiredness, vague aches and pains, rashes, excessive sweating, constipation or diarrhea, a clenched jaw, fainting, weight loss or gain. So when you see those physical changes in your body, you must know, okay, something is wrong, I must slow down. Otherwise, my violin string is going to break. I'm not going to be able to perform optimally. Those are the physical ones. Emotionally, irritability, becoming a bit more suspicious about things, more gloomy, more fuzzy, feeling tense, drained, cynical about things, feeling nervous, less satisfaction, demotivated, reduced self-esteem, job dissatisfaction. Mental, general indecision, memory failure, hasty decisions, bad dreams, excessive worry, muddled thinking, making mistakes, feeling more sensitive, a loss of concentration, impaired judgment. What type of behavior do we sometimes display when we're too stressed? We become less sociable, restless. Some of us tend to lose our appetite, others eat a bit more. Sleep problems, substance use, lying or denial, impaired speech, a voice tremor, and poor time management. So think about your own stress profile. I think stress is something that we need to reflect on quite often. If things suddenly change in your body, in your behavior, in the way you think about stuff, your emotions, then A lot of it has to do with stressors that you find it difficult to deal with. As I've said, stress is normal. Stress is not necessarily bad. We need stress to perform optimally. But in cases of having too much stress to deal with, we need to first become aware of it, know what it does to us and to the people around us, and then know what we can do about it. Now, by the end, later on in this session, I will work or introduce you to specific things, really easy things that you can do to manage your stress. When stress is really debilitating and having a really negative effect on our general lives and the way we live it, how we function, we sometimes need professional help. And I'll later on give you some information about that too. But I think it's very important that we must know that stress is not necessarily an enemy. It's not always bad. It can actually give us energy. It makes us want to take action. It gives us heightened awareness. It adds motivation and it adds excitement. That's when we are able to manage it. Bad stress, it takes away your energy. It creates negative feelings. It makes things seem impossible. It makes us want to give up and it makes our bodies react badly. The ideal is to experience what we call eustress, the ideal levels of stress, where you can go into a flow zone. Now that's when you're so focused that it feels like the world can really be at war and you will not even know about it. You can just be busy with what you need to be busy with and do your thing. They say, the researchers, one of the really well-known researchers in the field of flow, Michael, now it's very difficult to pronounce his surname, it's Sick-Mihail, Michael Sick-Mihail. He says that happens when you are experiencing optimal levels of stress, when you're busy with something that really interests you, and when it is not too challenging, but it is challenging enough. And the ideal is then to work in that flow zone and to really allow yourself to do what you love to do and to perform well. And I can honestly tell you, you can experience many flow zones while you're doing your thesis. We must just find a way to curb our stress levels and really to be productive. And therefore, I'm going to talk to you now about stress-free productivity. Now, that may sound like something that cannot exist, because if we're productive, we usually stress too much. But stress-free productivity, they say that's real. So how does that work? Let me just get my notes open. So they say, okay, so let's think about a time when you were really productive. Any time that you were really, really productive. What was the circumstances? Was that when you had more time? Now, chances are good that it was when you were at your busiest and due dates were around the corner. Do you agree? Why? Because you were able to dump everything that cluttered your mind during that specific moment, and you cleaned up space in your mind. And you were able to focus. You were in the zone and you did what you were supposed to do. I still remember my last 2 weeks before I submitted my PhD. I worked like a mad woman, day and night. Now, the same thing usually happens when we procrastinate. You move everything aside. That moment when you really know it's now the time to do it. Otherwise, you're going to run into big trouble. You move everything aside. and you focus on what needs to be done, and you just do it wonderfully. Many people really get addicted to that stage where they're so stressed, and then suddenly they know they must focus now. They clean up space in their brain, they work through the night, and there's a marvelous product waiting for them at the end of the road that they can submit. And it becomes a pattern of behavior. It's wonderful, but you can't keep it up. It's not sustainable. That's not stress-free productivity. That's stressed productivity. Too much for too long will really cause you lots of problems, lots of trouble. You will not be able to keep up with it. Somewhere along the road, you will run into trouble. But how can you use some of these principles to be productive without these extreme amounts of stress? The one thing that stands out for me, if you look at the principles at what worked when I waited until the last moment to do whatever I had to do, and where I was able to submit a good product, was I was able to make space in my mind to create. So one of the principles that's very important for stress-free productivity always is you need space to create and not time. So I want to ask you, how much time does it take for you to create a new idea? How much time does it take you to plan or to be strategic? Think about the last time when you were able to come up with a new idea. How much time did it take you? We often say, if I just had time, if I just had enough time to do something, I will really do it. Is it really about time? Sometimes just think about getting into a lift, moving from one floor to the other. Sometimes you just need that little bit of time between moving from one floor to the next one to come up with a new idea. Research shows that it's not time that's needed to generate ideas, to be creative. It's space. You need space to create, space in your mind. You need a less cluttered mind or a clutter-free mind to be able to appropriately engage with your work and to create space in your brain. That's what you need. And that's exactly why I asked you at the beginning of this session to do a brain dump, to free up your brain so that you can have space to engage with this session, to focus. So, if we look at cognitive research being done in this field, you can go and read up about the principles of cognitive distribution. That's exactly what you used, where you decided to reflect on and to recognize what's happening in your mind at that specific moment, to take it, to use different cognitive artifacts, pen, paper, Word documents, your cell phone, whatever, and to distribute, to redistribute all the things in your mind to an external source. So you moved all the ideas, the triggers, the projects that was running around in your mind to an external source for storage. That's like writing a to-do list. So the to-do list of many moons ago is not really a bad idea. It's just what you're going to do with that to-do list that's becoming more and more important and becoming more and more sophisticated, but we're going to speak about that now. Those of you who used to make to-do lists will probably know that feeling of feeling overwhelmed at first, knowing there's lots of stuff that needs to be done today. What happens once you've written it down? You experience immediate relief. While it is in your brain, it causes confusion and stress. And another thing, your brain is not very good with remembering. That causes stress. You cannot create when your brain is full of a lot of stuff that you know you must just remember to do. That's when you need to focus. First, dump the stuff that clutters your brain. The second very important principle for stress-free productivity is the brain is not good with remembering, but it's a master planner. All of us are constantly busy planning. As you're sitting there, you were probably doing a lot of plans while you were listening to me now. Already planning how you're going to implement some of the things that I've already mentioned. Am I right? My brain's not good with remembering, I must be honest. I'm almost always looking for my car keys. And therefore, don't try to use it as a remembering tool. Use what they call brain extensions. For example, a simple brain extension is to have a place near your door where you can hang your keys. Then you don't have to remember where you left your keys. You can just pick it up and leave the house when you need to go somewhere. I've told my husband or my partner about the brain extensions, and he was so happy to hear about it because his things are always constantly running around, lying around. And he said, well, that's an explanation for it. It's his brain extensions that's lying around. So that's something else to negotiate maybe. But you know, many of the top performers in the world make use of brain extensions, like Mark Zuckerberg. They're not using their brain to try to remember things. They have external props that they use to remember them about certain things that's needed to be remembered. But as I've said, the brain is a master planner. We're planning all the time. They say human beings start to plan since they are approximately 6 months old. Now that must be a very primitive way of planning, but apparently that's when they start to throw tantrums because the executive functions in the frontal lobe gets activated. So remember to use your head office to plan. Now, I find the work of David Allen to be very helpful. He's one of the productivity gurus in the world. And if you haven't read his book, Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity yet, I can really recommend it. He also has very good talks available on the internet. So if you have time, I think make time and listen to a few of his things. His ideas is really practical and it makes sense. But he used what he calls a natural planning model, and he compares it with what he calls an unnatural planning model. Now, how does an unnatural planning model look? Does it remind you of your work that you're busy with? That's how we're trained. That you must choose a topic for your thesis. Then you must read a lot and identify a problem, and develop research questions, write up a literature review, do your research, analyze and interpret the data, write up your findings, and voila, you can graduate. Easy, hey? Doesn't really work like that. Well, it didn't work for me like that. I took a few years to go, let me just, move back, to go through this cycle a few times because there was something wrong with it. Now, and what was wrong? And David Allen says it's because this is the most unnatural way of planning. There's another way that one should actually plan. Now let's practice David Allen's suggestion of planning so that we can be more productive. Now I want you to go back to your list that you've written at the beginning of this session. That one where you dumped, on which you dumped a lot of things. So just take out your list and have it in front of you. Now I'm going to share with you what's on my list. One of the things on my list is that I must remember to cook a meal for tonight. I promise you it's not going to look like this one on the photo, but there's an external trigger. Like I'm hungry, or I know my partner is going to be hungry later tonight. And the external trigger motivated me to write on my list, meal for tonight. So the natural planning model always starts with a purpose. Now take one of the words or ideas on your list that's really meaningful to you at the moment. Anyone, like I've said, for me, is I must make a meal for tonight. That's on my list, one of the words. So take any one of the words on your list that's really meaningful for you at the moment. And that's really part of the main reason for your existence right now. So what's the main purpose? For me, I must make a meal. Purpose, I'm hungry. My partner will be hungry after work. That's the purpose that will guide my planning. Hunger. The second phase, I want you now to imagine that you're a writer or a producer or a director. How do you envision success for this specific project of yours? For me, how will my cooked dinner look? What's my vision? What is my final ideal scenario? What will success look like? So if I close my eyes, I see this perfect cooked meal in front of me. So if you take your word, what's the purpose? And then the vision. What do you visualize? What's your final ideal scenario when you will know that you are successful? And now you will have to deal with the image of reality. What needs to really happen now? So now tension is created because there's a gap that exists between what you want and what you need. You need now a cleaned up head office to think creatively, strategically, and solve difficult problems. So your cleaned up mind, you will now use to generate a lot of new ideas around this purpose and vision of yours. So your brain will respond by trying to fill this mess with ideas. So you're busy with a brainstorm now. In my case, I'm now busy brainstorming. What do I have to do? What am I going to do to cook this meal? What's all the different things that I can do? So come up with as many things as possible. You don't have to judge it. Anything relevant to your topic or project. That word that you initially chose, the purpose, the vision, any idea. So write down any idea that you have about that. Don't limit yourself. Don't judge it, just write it down. You will find that some part of your brain will start to create structure from this mess of random ideas. So the critical, the logical, the rational side of your brain will start to kick in. It's okay. As long as you do the brainstorm, and now I want you to focus on a maximum of 3 things that you have listed in your brainstorm list. So a maximum of 3 things. That's realistic. And ask yourself, what's the next action that you need to take to do that right now? So for me, for example, one of the things on my list is potatoes. That's not an action. I know I must do something with potatoes, but the action is peel the potatoes and cook it. Another one is set the table. Set the table. Okay, that's an action, but I still need to do some things before that. Like I must take out the plates. A lot of things like cutlery, and I must have a tablecloth put over the table, everything. Oh, I also have meat. But I think you're getting to what I'm trying to say is that when we brainstorm, there's lots of ideas on our list. We can structure it, take out 3 things that's really that's useful for now, change it into an action. And there you have finished the first part of a natural planning model. What did you do with your PhD planning? The one that I've showed you. Let's just go back to that one. No, sorry, now I'm too far. There it is. We started with this one at around, I think, structure. Yeah, that was the 4th phase of the natural planning model. And that's why David Allen calls it then an unnatural planning model, because we skip so many things. And what happens then is that we tend to move backwards and forwards all the time because we're missing out on the purpose and the vision and the ideas, because we started with structure and we wanted to go into action. Now that happens with writing up a PhD or a master's. The same happens with everyday things. Going to the shops, you just have your list and you want to go and do your shopping, but you forget things. Because you didn't go through your natural planning model. Now, it may seem a bit unnatural because we're not used to this model, but just try it and you will see that it's going to cause you a lot less stress. It's going to make a lot more sense. And you're going to be able to be more productive and to make more creative decisions when you work in this specific way. So clean up your top office, work with a purpose, a vision, generate ideas, find structure, and go over. Always write down an action list. So let's look at this in a different way. Okay, so this is just summarizing the natural planning model. As I've said, it might feel a bit unnatural when you try to implement it because you're not used to it, but they say more or less 21 days and then you will be used to a new way of doing things. Try it. You will see that it will really, you will reap the benefits from it. So you make action decisions when you're smart. That's the third thing that's very important for stress-free productivity. Make action decisions when you're smart. And what I mean here is that each one of us has our own productivity cycle. We know when we're more productive and when we're not. So when you go through your natural planning process, make sure that it's during a time that you have enough energy for it, when you can focus on it, when you are not cluttered in your mind, when you have decluttered yourself, so that you can sit down and make your smart action decisions. So be aware of your own productivity cycle. When is the time when you can really focus, and when is the time when you need to do more repetitive things? Always with a to-do list, when you sit with your to-do list, ask yourself, is it actionable? What is the very first thing that needs to be done? Yesterday, while I was busy preparing for this session, there's one thing that came up on my mind that I must do, and I wrote it on my to-do list, but I just wrote down the person's name. So I, for example, wrote Sunny. And 2 hours later, I saw the word Sunny and I thought, ooh, I need to do something with Sunny, but I don't know what. So my external trigger was there, but I didn't know what the action was. And the to-do list must always be transferred into an action list. So ask yourself, when you sit with your to-do list, is it actionable? What is the very first thing that needs to be done next? And then another trick. Ask yourself, can it be done in less than 2 minutes? If yes, do it immediately and discard it. Get it done. Don't leave it there. Just get it done. If you can't do it, finish it within less than 2 minutes time. Keep it on your list, but make sure that it's written as an action. Don't make the same mistake as me. Write down what you need to do with this person and not only this person's name. So after you've done all your actions that you could do within 2 minutes time, you will still have actions remaining on your list, and divide it into meaningful groups like different projects or those that has a certain time frame connected to it, that can be diarized, that I know on a certain date it must be finished at a certain time. Or you can also group it according to context. Like if there's on my action list something that I must do for shopping, the context is shopping. And then you can write down buy potatoes. So in summary, for us to be productive, in a stress-free or a less stressed manner, it's about 5 things. It's about capturing your thoughts. Instead of keeping all of those ideas, to-dos, decisions, and so forth in your head, you need to capture them in on some external platform. So you must use your cognitive devices, your piece of paper and your pen, your Word document, your cell phone. Secondly, you need to process it. You need to turn everything into an action. If it can't be turned into an action, then keep it on a separate list for someday, or maybe a someday maybe list that you can review in a month's time. Maybe it can be turned into an action then. If there's any actions that can be completed in less than 2 minutes, do it. Just get it done. Organize it, give structure to your lists. Like I've said, group it into projects, those with a certain time frame connected to it, diarize it. If it's related to a specific context, group it into that specific context tasks. Fourthly, review regularly your lists. At the end of the day, make sure you are okay with your actions for the next day. Have an action list for the next day. Make sure there's no 2 minute or less actions on that list, still on that list. That will wait for the next day. Finish it if you can. Review your someday maybe list once a month, once in 6 months. Depends on your own context. And remember to make time to engage with the activities. Pick an action, focus, engage with that specific action, and just do it. A nice way when you have set out time to complete a specific action, that's now the actions that's going to take longer than 2 minutes. So it's more a project that you're busy with, is to use the POMODORO technique. Those of you who are not, who do not know about it, it really works very well. It really helps to increase our productivity. We teach that to our students for when they do their study time. I utilized it when I did my PhD thesis, and it was really wonderful to see after every time slot what I have achieved and to celebrate it. And how it basically works is that you take an hour and you divide it into, 2 hours, and you divide it into 25-minute slots. And you take 25 minutes and you decide on a task that you're going to do in that 25 minutes. So it immediately forces you to break down the overall task that you wanted to do for a certain time, say for the afternoon. So you break it down in little 25-minute chunks. You set the timer to 25 minutes. There's fantastic Pomodoro apps available for free. You set your timer for 25 minutes and you focus, you engage with your task and you do it. Then you take a 5-minute break and you start with the following 25 minutes. And after 4 repeats of 25 minutes focused time, you can take your 15 to 30-minute break or longer. If that's usually, I found that it's usually time for having a meal or going outside to get some exercise. Then you take a proper break before you come back and you sit down, you engage for 2 hours again. That's 2 hours, that's broken down into 4 times 25-minute slots. It's really after 25 minutes just to see what you have achieved. Gives you so much more energy to sit down for another 25 minutes to work focused and to do something again. So this I can really recommend. Now, I said that I will talk a little bit about stress and how to manage stress. Some things to do to maintain more or less normal stress levels is to make sure that you eat a proper meal 3 times a day. That's one of the things that that's not negotiable. You must have your breakfast, your lunch in the evening supper. Get exercise, even if it's 30 minutes of brisk walking every day or every second day, that's fantastic, but get some exercise. Make sure that you sleep enough. That's quite controversial. Most of the researchers that I've read about said 6 to 8 hours, but I know it's also very much an individual thing. How much time we sleep. Make time to socialize. It doesn't mean that you must go out and party every evening. That's what we usually tell the students, but make time to socialize with friends or with a significant other. And drink enough water. 8 glasses of water every day. That helps a lot with managing yourself, your own physical wellness, and your stress. When you feel that you're very much overwhelmed in a certain situation, try this exercise where you use your senses to relax yourself. Sit down, close your eyes, and listen for, what's 5 things that you can see around yourself? Listen for 4 things that you can hear. What's 3 things that you can feel? 2 things that you can smell? 1 thing that you can taste? Also become aware of what you enjoy, what makes you relax. For me, I love hearing the sound of water. That makes me relax. Nice music. Having a cup of coffee with somebody that I really care for. So just reflect. What makes life worthwhile for you and make time for that to help you to manage your stress so that you can become more productive. Now, I'm looking at our time and I see it's exactly an hour since we have started with this talk. And I hope that I was able to give you some ideas to work with during this weekend also, even if you can just try to implement one of these things. But as I've said, that sometimes we need somebody to sit with us, to look at our current situation and to come up with some ideas to help us to become more productive. And in cases where we're really struggling with stress and anxiety, to see somebody professional to help you. So I want to encourage you to contact us at Student Counselling if you need an appointment with one of our psychologists for an individual consultation to work with you either on your productivity, with your postgraduate studies, life in general, and to help you to contain your stress levels, to manage that too. You can just send us an email at Marianne. If you can just type that in the comment section for us, please, to studysuccess@sun.ac.za and ask for an appointment. Our appointments are for free, and we will there will be one of our psychologists available to offer you a session, to sit with you and to look with you through your own personal stress profile and to help you to become more productive. So now, that's all from my side. I must have a little bit of water now. My mouth is really dry. Any questions from your side?
Good afternoon, everyone. While we wait for the participants to maybe type questions or also to voice questions, I have one while listening to you, and thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering, so you mentioned the symptoms of stress, and the one being that you might struggle to fall asleep, or you might have trouble sleeping, waking up at night. And I'm just wondering, when you spoke at the end about how you can manage stress, one of the things is to sleep well and properly. So how do you work around that where stress keeps you awake, but you need proper sleep to actually manage the stress? Because now it's working against each other.
Sure, yeah. And it can be so frustrating, and it causes even more stress if you're lying in your bed and you know you must fall asleep now because the clock's ticking, but it's just that it's as if you can't fall asleep. Now there's a lot written about sleep hygiene, and I'm a strong supporter of those principles. It really helps a lot to do sleep hygiene audit. Where you must make sure that your room is well aired, that there's enough oxygen in your bedroom, that if it's possible at all, that it's as quiet as possible and dark, not with a lot of light in it. I mentioned quietness, not a lot of sounds, but many of us have clocks with a ticking sound in your bedroom. Now just imagine if you know the clock is ticking, you must fall asleep and you can actually hear it ticking, how much that's going to increase your stress. And you know what, Mayhan? If you can't fall asleep, I always say then get out of your bed, because the bed is becoming like an instrument of torture. So get out, go and drink a glass of water, just not coffee because the caffeine is going to keep you awake. But get out of your bed, drink a glass of water, walk around in your house, do something else and then go back to bed, because it's sometimes or many times it's a lot of worrying thoughts that's going around in your mind that's keeping you awake. And so the situation is just going to get worse if you're going to try and stay in your bed. Make sure that you're not too warm, that the room is not too warm or too cold. So make it really cozy and nice. And try not to work in your bedroom. Keep another place in the house available for work, or then if you must work in your bedroom, just don't work in your bed. And then screen time is a big problem. Put the cell phone and the e-books and everything away at least half an hour before you go to bed. I will even go for an hour before you go to bed.
Okay. Thank you, Elmien. That is quite helpful. While you were speaking, I also thought about, you also mentioned a bit of reflection to think about, when do you work best? Why do you work best at that time? Things like that. And I realized, again, reflection can also help there to realize maybe you are not exercising as you usually do, or that you need to start exercising, as that also helps to manage stress, but that also makes you tired at night to then more easily fall asleep.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So channel that energy and use it to your advantage. Don't lie in bed and yeah, it's just going to become a frustration. Rather use it to exercise.
I just want to add on, when Elmien spoke about the sleep hygiene, one of the other things is to have a set bedtime routine. So to not go to bed at 9 tonight, but 11 tomorrow evening, because tomorrow evening your brain, or the night after, then you go to bed again earlier. And then you struggle to fall asleep because now your brain doesn't know what on earth is going on, because previous night you had to be asleep only by 11, and now you want to try to sleep at 9.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any questions from the other participants? You can unmute yourselves, or you can even just type it in the chat.